60973. Are you prepared for the prospect of Corbyn leading this government? Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Jeremy Corbyn, and the spectre of Seamus Milne by his right and John McDonnell to his far, far left at Downing Street. Do you think the thought there of Corbyn being Prime Minister, does it fill you with dread, or does it fill you with hope and optimism and giddiness? Well, I want to hear from you. 0345 6060 973. We're going to take a listen to some of what Corbyn said in his speech. I'm going to tell you some of what I think about it. But then, most importantly, we need to hear from you. So here is Jeremy Corbyn, and is he a Prime Minister in waiting?
Labour is ready to tackle inequality, ready to rebuild our National Health Service, ready to give opportunity to young people. If there was no other reason for the Tories to go, their self-interested Brexit bungling would be reason enough. So I have a simple message to the Cabinet. For Britain's sake, pull yourself together or make way.
Now, in my view, and of course we're going to go to your view in a moment, but in my view, sorry, I was just looking at an image of London's Mayor Sadiq Khan not looking too happy as Corbyn spoke, but that's probably because, as I was saying yesterday, he had to fight just to be allowed to a couple of seconds on the podium, because they weren't giving any of Labour's senior non-Corbyn figures time to speak. It was all about Corbyn, this conference, all about Corbyn. You could buy Corbyn mugs, Corbyn t-shirts, you could buy even a memorabilia of Corbyn's cat. What is it? Paw? Something. Yeah, El Gato, that's him. Sorry, I don't know where I got paw from. But you know, everything related to Corbyn, t-shirts, hats, cat images, it was a bit of Comrade Corbyn for sale at this conference, a bit like the cult of the personality. But never mind, those senior Labour figures were relegated to, I think, the balcony. We are here to dissect Corbyn's speech. What did you think about it? In my opinion, I think this comes down to two things. First of all, Corbyn is undoubtedly incredibly popular among the Labour rank and file. He was met with adulation at this speech, with multiple standing ovations. It felt more like a rally than it did a conference speech. It was more like, I must say, a rally or a concert with a rock star on stage and people continuously cheering at every line. The substance of the speech, I'm not so sure, deserved those cheers, but we can come to that. But before I come to that, I want to say that actually part of Corbyn's success at the moment must be down to Theresa May's weakness. Just as when Theresa May declared the general election thinking that she would sweep up in this country and increase her majority, she was attempting to do so off the back of Corbyn's then apparent weakness. And so just as Theresa May called that snap general election thinking Corbyn is too weak to resist her, it appears now to be the case that it's Theresa May that's too weak to resist Corbyn. And so part of Corbyn's success must be explained by taking a look at the uninspiring Conservative government that we have and the totally uninspiring Conservative Prime Minister that we have. So I want to caveat what I'm about to say, that this isn't just about critiquing what Corbyn didn't say in his speech, because there's a lot he actually didn't say. It's also about recognising that the current Prime Minister we have is absolutely abysmal, and the Conservatives have nothing new to say. They're too busy fighting each other over Brexit. They cannot agree on what this Brexit that they're so intent on bringing about looks like, and they are totally distracted. They will have one chance to turn this around, one chance, and that is at the Tory party conference that is coming up soon. If the Prime Minister, if Theresa May is unable to inspire the nation at that conference, then one of two things will happen. Either she will be in office and not in power all the way until the next general election, at which point Corbyn stands a good chance of winning, or she'll be deposed by members of her own party, and they'll try and put somebody up against Corbyn who's more charismatic to attempt to stall some of the momentum that momentum has built for Corbyn. And that was pun intended. So we have that situation. So I think actually first point there is to recognise that Theresa May's weakness is Corbyn's strength. Second point to recognise is Corbyn's strength isn't really that strong. And it's only appearing strong. And in fact, he may well, in the polls, he's set, actually, if there was a general election today, probably would win. The polls show him ahead. But he's ahead primarily because of point one of how weak Theresa May is. And what Corbyn said in his speech and the show of strength and the apparent readiness of the Labour Party to be in power all comes unravelling when you look at the substance of what Corbyn didn't and did say in this speech. So, for example, you heard him just there mocking the Conservatives on Brexit. Well, there was, yes, that one reference to Brexit in Corbyn's speech. At the conference, there was no other main debate given to that topic of Brexit. And even in the mocking of the Conservatives in Corbyn's speech of Brexit, he didn't propose any vision of his own. And that's because, folks, he doesn't have a vision. Jeremy Corbyn is as vague, ambiguous and unclear on what to do about this Brexit conundrum as Theresa May is. And so I was frankly quite aghast that he was mocking Theresa May over this, because he equally has been as vague, equally has let us all down without offering any opposition or alternative vision to what Brexit should or shouldn't look like. And there he was mocking the Conservatives over that. And again, you can drill down into this speech, and it was actually really surprising because there was nothing new offered in this speech. Corbyn began with some story of what happened in Brighton 100 years ago and never completed it. And that story never went anywhere. He began his speech about a brave woman who set up something for female women's rights and trades unions and succeeded in achieving everything she wanted to achieve, and gave the story almost as an anecdote. He kicked off his speech with an anecdote, never returned to it, never explained why the speech kicked off with that, and then carried on. And I think something I came across described this speech perfectly. It was like, if you're on the board of a company and you have to give a speech representing the company, but you've got too many egos in the room, too many chefs and not enough, what's the word? What is that? Too many cooks and not enough what? Or too many, too many chiefs and not enough Indians. That's the one I'm looking for, right? So you've got everybody has a view, everybody has an ego, and everybody wants to chip in and alter and edit this speech. So the exact opposite of what Theresa May's manifesto was in the last general election, where it was one person, Nick Timothy, who decided what that manifesto would look like and didn't share it with anybody. Perhaps Fiona Hill was the only other person to cast eyes on it. And we know how disastrous that can be. But Corbyn's speech appeared to me to be the exact opposite of that. It was almost as if everybody and their uncle and their cat had a say in this speech, because the thing was a rambling, it was too long, it was rambling, and it had everything under the sun in it. So from 1 minute, you got Corbyn talking about America and foreign policy, rather amateurishly, talking about, suddenly deciding enough is enough, he says. We're going to end Palestinian oppression and the occupation of the West Bank and the illegal settlements. We're going to end it. Well, yeah, every single head of state has tried that since 1948. What makes you, Comrade Corbyn, think that you're going to suddenly end it when you couldn't even turn up? You couldn't even turn up to the Labour Friends of Israel meeting. You decided not to show. Right? So, on the one hand, these grand statements go from foreign policy, criticising Trump, criticising the lack of peace in the Middle East, moving from there to North Korea, and then moving to the Rohingya crisis in Burma, while promising at the same time that not only was he going to save the world with this great, ethical foreign policy and deal with Saudi Arabia. Of course, they're not good either, right? So he's talking all this morality in foreign policy, and then comes home and talks about saving the NHS in the same speech, and talks about saving the students and saving everyone's jobs. The only people he didn't like, of course, were the corporates. How exactly all of this was going to happen, it is rather beguiling, and it boggles the mind. It's confusing, because I'm not so sure precisely how this experiment is going to work. But then the people that are so keen on backing him are precisely the sorts of people that didn't have to live through 1970s England, where this was last it was last attempted, and socialism in the UK was on its deathbed until Thatcher came along and went the other way. So the people backing Corbyn haven't had to live through this vision and this dream, so they won't know what that feels like. They won't recognise, for example, that currently, with all of its faults, with all of its ills, the UK is one of the strongest, or the strongest economy in Europe. And France, with all its regulation, Corbyn-style regulation, mind you, is struggling, is on its knees. It's not getting anywhere, really. And French people, young French people, are leaving France in their droves. They're coming to London. They're going to the States, New York and other cities, because they are tired of attempting to apply for jobs that simply don't exist in France. France isn't, and Paris isn't the city it once used to be, because it's so overly regulated and it's almost impossible to do anything about it. And I'll give you one anecdotal example of what is, the subject of much study, just to bring home the reality of what this kind of over-regulation that Corbyn is promising means for a country. The closest analogy I can bring to this currently is France, because it's right next door. Once upon a time, about 3 years ago or so, I landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. So imagine this is Heathrow, and imagine this happens at Heathrow. I land at this airport. I'm with my missus, and I get out of this airport, and I duly look for any means of transportation from the airport to my hotel. So I first see the taxis, and I approach the taxi with all our luggage. We're hauling our luggage up to this taxi. We're like, finally, a taxi. Could you take us to this hotel? In our, sort of broken French. And the taxi man says, no. And we say, what do you mean, no? Why are you refusing a ride? He says, I am on strike. I say, okay, you're on strike. All right, fine. Point us to the private hire vehicles. He says, over there. So we go over there, and I go up to their equivalent of whatever their Addison Lee equivalent is, and I say, sir, could you, my missus speaks better French than I do, could we get us to the hotel? He says, no. I say, why? This is a true story, by the way, folks. He says, no. I say, why? He says, we are on strike. I say, okay, point us to the bus stop. So we go to the bus stop, and we find the bus stop, and we say, there was a bus there, and there was a man sitting in the bus. He said, what time did your bus leave? He says, no, we are on strike. I said, well, how are we meant to get to the hotel? Well, I said, I know, I have an idea. You must have a tube system, right? Where is your underground? He says, they are on strike too. I'm like, hang on a minute. If everyone's on strike, how on earth are all these passengers who are getting off this aeroplane meant to get to their hotel? So he says to me, the airport has provided a shuttle bus that comes every half hour. And so we wait half an hour, and along comes this tiny minibus. Now imagine hundreds of passengers getting off airplanes with their luggage, all trying to squeeze into this tiny minibus that the airport has provided, shuttling these poor holidayers from the airport to their hotel with all their bags, squeezing into this thing, this tiny little box of metal that is meant to be... It wasn't even a coach. And that is the problem. Imagine that happening in Heathrow. Just imagine that happening at Heathrow Airport, or even Stansted Airport, or even Luton Airport for that matter. Imagine that happening at Luton Airport. It wouldn't happen, right? And that's the problem with over-regulation. Everything has come to a standstill. And French politicians, the minute they try and even suggest that they want to break through some of this, they are met with mass strikes. It's impossible to change once the rules kick in that way that allow people to organise en masse in this way. And what has happened in that situation is the opposite of what unions were meant to achieve. My father was a founder of a union. I think unions achieve magnificent things in the history of workers. But what they've become in many instances over, especially where they have a monopoly over public transport, is they've become the very monopoly they hated the capitalist boss having over the consumer. Now instead it's the union that owns the monopoly still over the consumer, which is us, members of the public. So especially in things like transport, there's nothing we can do. And this is where I see Corbyn's vision is frankly quite dangerous. But are you ready for Corbyn in Downing Street? With an equally abysmal Conservative Prime Minister, that may well just happen. But it's time for you to tell me what you think. 0345 60 60973. You're listening to Maajid Nawaz here on LBC, and the time now is 10:17.
This is LBC at home with Ian Dale at Drive.
Jeremy Corbyn's big speech at the Labour conference, it basically consisted of Tories useless, Labour good, government in waiting, hit the rich. I thought it was actually quite depressing. It was depressing in length. It lasted about an hour and 20 minutes.
Leading Britain's conversation. Ian Dale at Drive. Only on LBC.
You've seen it in the press and on the news. The PPI deadline. Isn't it time you got back the money you could still be owed? If you've still not checked whether you had PPI on bank loans and credit cards, at PPI Hotline, we'll check for you for free. And if it was missold, we'll fight to get back what you could still be owed. Just text WIN to 82222.
PPI Hotline. Text WIN to 82222.
This weekend, escape to a very special place
The 100-Acre Paradise.
and meet the family behind the world's favourite bear.
Why does everyone like Winnie the Pooh so much? He's my bear.
After the war, there was so much sadness. Then Winnie the Pooh came along and he made people smile again.
Critics agree. Goodbye Christopher Robin is spellbinding and beautiful, with outstanding performances from Donald Gleeson and Margot Robbie.
You're the luckiest boy in the world because you know the real Winnie the Pooh.
Goodbye Christopher Robin in cinemas Friday.
Laughing, loving, playing, guiding, caring.
Being a parent doesn't stop when your life does. Take care of your loved one's futures today at legalandgeneral.com, the UK's #1 life insurance provider.
Growing, learning, dreaming.
You are forever a parent. Cover from £6 a month. Limitations and exclusions apply. Claim based on new life insurance sales in 2016.
Hi Mum, what you doing?
Making fairy cakes.
Can I help?
Of course, sweetheart. Can you weigh each egg to make sure they're between 57 and 60 grams? Then sieve this flour, put that through another sieve, and finally through this really fine sieve. Then count these hundreds and thousands. I like 200 on each.
Actually, I have some homework.
Oh.
People who work at Esso are obsessed with details. Useful if you're a fuel engineer like Deborah. Our new Synergy Supreme Plus unleaded fuel reduces friction to help look after your engine. Esso. Energy lives here. See esso.co.uk for details.
England at Wembley. You can't describe it. Experience it for yourself. England's crucial World Cup qualifier v Slovenia. Wembley, 7:45pm, 5th of October. Tickets from £20, £10 for kids, £2.50 booking fee. Be there. thefa.com/tickets.
It's amazing what you can do with a tap. With just a tap, you can go from craving to tasting. From choosing to cheersing. And even from searching to surprising. Now with HSBC, you can use Android Pay wherever you see the contactless symbol. It's easy, fast and secure. Simply download Android Pay from the Google Play Store. So explore, tap and enjoy with HSBC.
Terms and conditions, device restrictions and transaction limits apply. Most HSBC cards are eligible, subject to status.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC with Maajid Nawaz.
Good evening, it's Maajid Nawaz here on LBC. Jeremy Corbyn has laid claim to the political mainstream, but acknowledged Labour needs to do more to earn voters' trust before it can win power. Are you prepared for a Prime Minister Corbyn in Downing Street? 0345 60 60 973. Or text us on 84850 or tweet us at LBC or tweet me directly at Maajid Nawaz. Now, you just heard me speak about my views. It's time to listen to you. Judith wants to speak to us from Kenilworth. Tell us what you think, Judith.
Well, I'm prepared for Jeremy Corbyn to become Prime Minister. I'm prepared to go to London, to the Canadian Embassy, to apply for residency, and I shall have to get a passport, because I haven't had a passport for about 20-odd years. And I shall go and I shall sell up and go and live in Canada. I could not live under Jeremy Corbyn.
Oh, wow, you'd leave the country.
Yes.
And what in particular would drive you to such a decision? And why Canada, out of all places, Judith?
Well, Canada because...
Have you been watching too much Due South? Is that what's going on?
Sorry, say it again.
Have you been watching too much Due South? Do you remember that TV programme?
No, I don't.
Oh, it's hilarious. It's a satire on Canadians.
My friend lives in Canada, and my daughter-in-law and my granddaughter.
Yeah.
They went out there, 10 years ago now, I suppose. I mean, they've been saying, oh, come on out here, Mum, you'd love it. And I said, no, I wouldn't, I'd hate it. But I'd hate it a lot less than living here under Jeremy Corbyn.
And what in particular would wind you up about Corbyn?
Well, just his incompetence, really.
Judith, do you remember, I'm not going to presume how old you are, do you remember the 70s?
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah. Describe to us, I mean, I don't know how old you were in the 70s. I mean, I was born in the 70s, so I wouldn't remember it. But describe to us, when I spoke about the regulation, is there anything, I mean, does it ring a bell? You know, when I warn about over-regulation, just basically bringing this country to a standstill, and that's what happened, I read, that's what happened to the UK in the 70s. We were the sick man of Europe at one time.
We were indeed. But I mean, the thing that reminds me, well, the 70s makes me think immediately of things like all the power cuts. We could only have, I think it was 3 hours at a time of power. I mean, I've never stopped stocking up on candles since.
Hold on, Judy. Hold on. See, now that's precisely why I asked the question, because that detail, even I didn't know, and I'm sure the current millennials who are backing Corbyn wouldn't know. You're telling me that the UK in the 70s, when it was last regulated in the way that Corbyn is promising to do so, only had 3 hours of power a day?
Yes, because of strikes.
Wow. And there was me talking about the strikes in France. I didn't even know that happened in the UK with 3 hours of power a day, caused by the very strikes that I was warning against.
Yes. Oh, I mean, well, as I say, I've never stopped stocking up on candles since then.
Were these the miners' strikes? Was this because of the coal? Because I imagine we were powered on coal back then.
Well, you see, when the power goes off, even if you've got a gas boiler, it won't work because there's no power to generate the pump.
Yeah. And that would happen, what, in the winter as well?
Oh, yes.
So it'd be freezing?
Yes.
You see, this is where, it's like, if workers are protesting their employers and trying to get better rights, but the victims in that protest are members of the public, that cannot be right, because then we're held hostage to the very monopoly that these unions have over us, that they're complaining that the capitalist boss has over them.
Yes.
So it's like, it's like...
Unions have too much power.
Well, railroads and tube lines and these sorts of things that, they are, there's just one train track. It's not like you can choose a different route, right? And if somebody has a monopoly over that train track and they decide to push their employer, whether it's private or nationally owned, for a higher wage and go on strike until they get the higher wage, the rest of the country suffers until they resolve their dispute because there's only one rail track.
Yes, indeed. No, I mean, I just could not face living under Labour again.
Well, I mean, Labour, it depends what type of... I mean, my main concern is the kind of, Corbyn momentum Labour as opposed to the David Miliband Labour. I would have joined the Labour Party if it was David Miliband. I would have backed him and I would have campaigned for him. I mentioned due south. It all went south when the wrong Miliband won, I think. It just didn't recover from there.
I agree there.
All right, Judy, thank you very much. Thank you for calling in. There's Judith there from Kenilworth. We're going to Pip, who's on the line from Welling. You may want to disagree, Pip.
Well, yes. I mean, I've always been an old lefty, but I actually only joined the party because of Corbyn. And actually, I have to agree with how you described the conference speech yesterday. It was actually quite excruciating. But the point is...
Oh, that's interesting. So you agree with that, Pip?
Well,
as a Corbyn fan?
More his presentation. But actually, the extraordinary thing is, everything he said, which in other words was creating an ethical foreign policy and ethical trading, is actually possible. And the thing is, I'm going to be honest, Jeremy Corbyn, all his political career has been sort of like a bit of white noise in the background. But again, his actual record in going against war and all these things is actually going to stand in our favour, because what's the one thing those jihadi jokers go on about is our sort of foreign policy.
Yeah, but Pip, I'm not so sure he's against war. He's against America. American-led war or British-led war, but he's not against Hamas-led or Hezbollah-led or IRA-led stuff, is he? I mean, he's stood side by side with militants himself.
But all those guys, that no one's fighting anymore.
Well, I mean, Hamas is, and the IRA aren't, but Hamas and Hezbollah are.
But actually, do you know what? It's always better to have dialogue. And I'm sorry that lady sort of wants to do something drastic by leaving, and how they hark back to the 70s. It's the 21st century. You mentioned railways. It is ridiculous that we've got our railways for this tiny island owned by different factions. It is ridiculous. And we, the public, pay huge subsidies. It is all it's a disgrace.
Yeah, I mean, Pip, listen, lots of things can improve. I've said, for example, I'm left-leaning. I would join Labour under David Miliband. I'm just not that left-leaning. Comrade Corbyn isn't my cup of tea, to be honest. Well, what it means is, for example, I don't think... Look, Tony Blair, minus the Iraq war, because I never supported that, but Tony Blair brought in the minimum wage. Good thing. I like it. Tony Blair brought peace in Northern Ireland. Fantastic. He built the Eurostar. These are great achievements for a Prime Minister that had a good, solid 3 terms in office, and Britain didn't fall apart. So it's not the prospect of a Labour... I mean, obviously, the Iraq war is a big elephant in the room, and I mention it again because I was so opposed to it. But it's not that Britain falls apart under a Labour government. What I worry about is Britain will fall apart if we go back to the over-regulation of the 70s. And that's what Corbyn's promising. He's promising more power to the unions, more spending, where he's getting more tax on everyone that he thinks can afford it. It will grind the United Kingdom to a halt.
I totally get where you get that, have those fears.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there's checks and balances. There's no reason why we can't actually create a very simple blueprint that's fair, decent, affordable, runs on time. We've got the chance to completely rewrite the rules.
Okay.
And actually,
can I ask you a separate question, Pip? And look, I've got every sympathy with the trains do need a lot of improvement, and actually, the spirit in which this stuff is promised, I'm with you on. It's just that practicality-wise, I'm not so sure. But here's where I think there's something a bit crooked in the spirit, and that is that Corbyn, and I'm speaking to you as a British Muslim, right? Corbyn mentioned Muslim causes twice in his speech. He mentioned Palestine and he mentioned the Rohingya crisis. Why didn't he mention anti-Semitism and stick up for the Jews in his own party in that speech, and didn't even attend the Friends of Israel conference?
Do you know what? I can't disagree with you on that. And the thing is, there only needs to be a whiff of that, and it can be completely unfounded, but it's a taint that you can't remove. There has been individuals, and the thing is, he made it crystal clear. And if anyone has proved to have made any sort of trollish or anti-Semitic statements, that is a criminal offence, and that should be enough. He said that, and, I'm sorry, I get really fed up with the lazy, he's a Marxist, he's a blah, blah, blah. What does that mean? If he's guilty of anything, prove it.
Well, this is so I'm asking a very specific question. That is that if it was as it was found in a survey by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, that 80% of party political anti-Semitic incidents come from the progressive left parties, and they included in that the Greens and the Lib Dems, not just Labour, but of course Labour is a bigger party out of them, so proportionally,
Shame them.
right? So
Shame
yeah,
them.
so hold on. So if 80% of party political anti-Semitic incidences come from the progressive parties, including Labour, and yet Corbyn didn't even attend the Friends of Israel Labour fringe event. I mean, it doesn't, and didn't mention anti-Semitism in his speech.
Yeah. Well, I can't disagree with you. It's obviously a seriously important issue, and it needs putting to bed. So, sadly, yet again, he's going to have to come out with something. Will people trust him? I don't know. But if he's done anything personally, go for him. But he personally hasn't.
Yeah, that's what I'm going from about. He didn't turn up to the Friends of Israel event.
I agree, actually. To me, that's actually a gaffe, because it's obviously a burning issue, and it does need, that's clumsy and crass. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
Well, listen, Pip, you've been a sport. Thank you very much.
Thank
And because at the end of the day, I'm a known critic, and you've called up and we've had a polite conversation. And not everything you say is without merit. Of course, the trains do need looking at, and there's a lot of stuff that's going wrong in the world of foreign policy. And you're mentioning the ethical foreign policy. I think Robin Cook first mentioned that term, and of course, there's a lot there. Saudi Arabia, we were talking about yesterday on this show. We've got some serious things to look at with some of the actions and behaviours of how we deal with these countries. You're listening to Maajid Nawaz here on LBC. The time at 10:31. It's time for the news headlines with Andy Ivy.
Kensington and Chelsea Council has voted unanimously to terminate its contract with the body responsible for managing Grenfell Tower. The tenant management organisation is accused of breaching its duty of care by ignoring residents' complaints, failing to carry out repairs and its response to the fire. Ryanair could face legal action from the Civil Aviation Authority after cancelling thousands of flights. The regulator has begun enforcement action against the carrier for failing to give customers accurate information about their rights on things like extra hotel costs. Jeremy Corbyn's told his party's conference that Labour is on the threshold of power. He also promised to introduce rent controls if he's elected Prime Minister. LBC weather. Any rain will continue to move east across the country tonight. Showers for most places by morning, with some mist and fog patches, an overnight low of 14 degrees.
This is LBC.
You've seen it in the press and on the news. The PPI deadline. Isn't it time you got back the money you could still be owed? If you've still not checked whether you had PPI on bank loans and credit cards, at PPI Hotline, we'll check for you for free. And if it was missold, we'll fight to get back what you could still be owed. Just text WIN to 82222.
PPI hotline. Text WIN to 82222.
Battersea, Chelsea, Elephant and Castle, Kensington, King's Cross.
So far this year, over 1,600 keen buyers have registered with My London Home, all looking for property in central London. Property just like yours.
Mayfair, Pimlico, Soho.
So if you're serious about selling, go to mylondonhome.com now to get your instant online valuation.
Victoria, Waterloo.
mylondonhome.com. Passionate about property.
Divorce. It affects every part of your life. You, your family, your home, your finances. And if you're a man facing divorce, perhaps even one you don't want, the situation becomes even more complicated. It's at times like these that you need a professional you can trust. Cordell & Cordell is dedicated to helping men in matters relating to divorce. Call now on 0330 60 60 161 or visit cordell.co.uk, office in central London. A partner men can count on.
Travel Pack. Have the right flight at the right price. In fact, we'll price match most worldwide flights if you find one cheaper elsewhere at the time of booking. So, if you need to book a flight, remember the Travel Pack price match. Call Travel Pack on 0208 903 9999. You won't find a better price for your flight. Travel Pack 0208 903 9999. ATOL protected. Excludes low-cost operators. Competitors must be ATOL licensed. Conditions apply.
To some, being a hero is wearing a funny mask or pulling your underpants over your trousers. But there is a better way. By going sober this October for Macmillan Cancer Support, you'll be transformed into a sober hero, proudly saying no to the booze and yes to raising money for people with cancer. Let's join together. You, me, my next-door neighbour Jeff, all sober heroes, and no silly underpants, except maybe Jeff. Feel heroic for 31 days. Sign up today at gosober.org.uk.
That's great. And now the bride's parents.
So it just clicked. I don't develop film in a darkroom anymore. Why do I still print invoices and bank checks? Now I pop my PayPal Here card reader in my camera bag or email an invoice with a link that gets me paid in a flash.
With a PayPal business account, you'll spend less time chasing money and more time earning it. Search PayPal business account and put yourself in the picture.
PayPal's my perfect partner.
Big smile.
Sign up is free. Terms, card reader and transaction fees apply.
Maajid Nawaz on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Good afternoon, it's Maajid Nawaz here on LBC, leading Britain's conversation. Jeremy Corbyn has laid claim to the political mainstream, but acknowledged that Labour needs to do more to earn voters' trust before it can win power. Are you prepared for a Prime Minister Corbyn in Downing Street? 0345 6060 973. Or you can text us on 84850 or tweet us at LBC or tweet me directly at Maajid Nawaz. Do you believe Corbyn has what it takes to be Prime Minister? What did you make of Corbyn's speech? I think the whole thing went on too long, was a rambling mess in which everything and nothing was mentioned at the same time. But what do you think? Have you always supported Labour? Or has Corbyn caused your conversion? 0345 6060 973. Andy wants to speak to us from Seaford. Tell us what you think, Andy.
Hi, good evening, Maajid.
Evening.
I'm working class. Born in the 60s, I lived through the 70s. I've been a member of the trade union, been a member of the British Army, all the rest of it. I like some of their policies, but I think if you ever voted for Jeremy Corbyn, Diane Abbott, Henry Thornberry, and what's his name, MacDonald, you have put the four most dangerous people in charge of this country.
Let's call him MacDonald. It's MacDonald. But that's fine, let's call him MacDonald, Andy.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Ronald MacDonald.
It terrifies me.
Yeah. So they're four of the most dangerous people in this country. What about Seamus Milne? You left him out. He's pro-USSR in some columns. In one column in particular, said Stalin's misunderstood.
I don't read the papers anymore. I stopped reading the papers 10 years ago.
He wrote that for The Guardian. I've read the column. That's Seamus Milne, his director of, I think it's political strategy these days or something or the other. John MacDonnell was a member of the Communist Party of Great Britain. I didn't even know they still had a party.
Well, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn was sitting down having a cup of tea with Jerry Adams and Mike McGuinness.
Yeah. And then he says he's pro-peace. But
mates were trying to kill me.
Thing is, people say he's against militancy and war, and yet he seems to be okay with terrorist groups.
Yeah. The terrorist groups... I honestly believe that Jeremy Corbyn hates British history.
Well, I mean, most communists do, though, don't they?
Yeah.
So if you're like a hard lefty, I mean, I don't think he'd describe himself as a communist, but if you're kind of a hardened Marxist type, then you're going to hold a level of disdain for most of this country's history.
Well, what makes me laugh is, like, Labour's supposed to be for the working class.